Hey everyone, my name is Stephanie Lau. Welcome to Empower Your Mindset. The series was created to help people transform their fear and anxiety into more love, joy, and healing. Today's guest is the wonderful Niraj Naik. He is the founder of the Soma Breath, an international school of breathwork, and he's also a holistic health expert. Niraj, thank you so much for joining me. It's such an honor to speak with you. I would love to hear more about how you got started on your path to wellness.
Yeah, certainly. So pleasure to be here. So I used to actually be a pharmacist years ago. So I was in the so-called healing profession already, but quickly found out that that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like I was really serving people in the way I wanted to. I got into this profession to actually help people get better, not make them worse. And I just saw more and more people getting worse rather than better. So what happened was I actually got very disillusioned and ended up getting really sick after a number of different events. But that's when I ended up getting an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis, which left me housebound for almost a year. And it was then literally I surrendered to the healthcare system at that point because they put so much fear into you. But I was facing having my colon removed or being a guinea pig for a drug that hadn't even been tested before. There were two options a consultant gave. And she also said that diet doesn't make a difference, that stress levels don't make a difference, that basically shut up and take the pills.
Mm.
So that was obviously quite soul destroying. I was even told by the GP to wear a nappy, like at one point, because with ulcer colitis, you go to toilet like 40, 50 times a day and you can't hold it in. So, they were like, oh, well, wear a nappy. So having given that kind of news at 33 years old with no hope was like pretty shocking and embarrassing as well. So, everything goes through your brain at that point, like survival, fear of being, somebody who's going to be in a relationship again, having able to do the things that you really want to do, all of these things get kind of challenged. But they say God stands for gift of desperation. And it was in this moment that I was so desperate, the most desperate moment in my life. It was a make or break situation. I either could have surrendered to healthcare system, which unfortunately a lot of people do, or I could have taken a different path, and that's what I thankfully did because somebody came to rescue a yoga teacher in the UK, Swami Ambikananda, and she said to me that you've got a gift here. If you can heal yourself from this, you're going to be a great role model to other people. Because I'd actually got really
Mm.
good at getting people off the drugs in the pharmacy. That was one of the things that I found a little passion for. Was actually getting people off the meds by helping them improve their lifestyle, and I had really good results. But then uh, I was trying to actually get this knowledge out to the masses. This method I'd created with healthy shoppiness through one of the biggest corporations in the UK. But they
Mm.
they liked it at first, and then they just crushed that plan. And that's when I got really disillusioned and sick. So then, luckily,
Mm.
Swami Amkananda shifted my perception. She gave me a few basic tips on from pranayama, Ayurveda, and yoga, traditional yoga, which is what she teaches. And that took me down a rabbit hole. I had such good results just from the breathing practices from pranayama of switching off stress that I just went crazy trying to learn as much about this holistic stuff as possible. Because I actually am from an Indian tradition practice, but a lot of Indian culture has been kind of lost over the years. And in fact, most Indians don't practice yoga. They don't do meditation. They follow a very Western, modern, corporate system of living lifestyle. So I had to go back to my roots, and I had to start really believing in stuff that I thought was complete woo-woo before. But that was the best thing that happened. And then I healed myself, and that's when I made a pact. I was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get these techniques out to as many people as possible, not through a corporate system, but my own method, and to put science to this, put evidence to these techniques. And thankfully, it worked out. So in a few years, we got this huge movement forming now. We've got thousands of instructors around the world sharing the techniques that I kind of evolved. It's not like I invented anything. I put together like various tools, both modern and from ancient practices, into one system. And music is a big part of this. Like, I'm a music producer. Going back to my passion for music and being creative was an amazing awakening experience in itself, because through the left brain educational system and then going into a very robotized corporate career, you end up becoming a robot, and
Mm.
you lose your humanness. And that is very stressful for people who are very creative, which I am. And there's probably a lot of people right now suffering doing robotized jobs, and when they really want to be doing something more useful with their skills. And look, the world's shifting now. Like, robots are going to replace most human careers. So we need to educate and create a system of education that feeds the right side of the brain. This is what we're all about. Soma Breath is all about whole brain activation, both left and right, and understanding your true self, who you are, what do you really want, and what do you need, and how to go after your things in this crazy, hectic, crazy, chaotic world that we live in. That's the path of Soma Breath. That's what it's about.
Wow. I bet you could never have imagined, your journey taking you so far and reaching so many people around the world. And I'm curious if you could speak more about Soma Breath and how it's a little different, as far as how you would begin to get into the right side of your brain. Do you begin with more
Yeah.
breathing, or do you, with music, or is there another?
Well, music lights up both hemispheres of the brain. Just listening to a piece of music that you like lights up the brain, like almost more powerfully than most practices. Music is a very, very, very therapeutic practice, which we kind of take for granted. There's many different types of music. There's very commercial, tacky, artificial music that's flooded, the world over the last few years, which is designed for the purpose of creating a type of culture to sell types of products, to basically brainwash people into a way of life that makes a lot of money for privileged people at the top. That's the modern mainstream music culture. But if you go back to ancient times, music was an integral part of spiritual practices. And like in the Indian system, for example, the ragas would create melodies and with note, types of intonations and note structures that actually create physiological changes in the body and
Wow.
have the power to awaken different parts of the brain. So, music was always a core part of spiritual practice, but it got taken away over the years by the mainstream music industry and turned into something recreational or cheap, and without any of the depth that it used to have. So I actually I got very lucky back in the day with success when I was like 19. I ended up running one of the biggest raves of the time in the UK, and we had like 2,000 people every month for like several years. And it was a huge, like kind of incredible experience actually. Like, it's one of the most memorable times of my life doing that. Hold on, put it this way. So yeah, so I got successful very early, and it was all around music, and I thought that's what I was going to do. But that music scene as well, the underground dance music scene, also has its problems. Although it does go back to the roots of music as a way to bring people together with a shared common interest and to celebrate life and to reach ecstatic peak states where people have memorable moments that can shape, their future. And so that was great. But then there's also the other side where there's lots of drugs involved and crazy hedonism and lots of bad characters around who thrive off, like parasites off people who want to, pursue this sort of type of music. And that's what happened to me, actually. And I got very successful very young, and then boom, I lost everything. And that's why I ended up becoming a pharmacist. But it was like that. What the reason I got into music was because the playing music for me was a way to escape the bullying I was getting at school, and also the boredom, the sheer boredom of that kind of educational system. This constant just regurgitating information. To break free of that, I used to like escape and go to the music room and learn how to put music together, like with synthesizers. And that got me popular, actually. Kind of like people sort of thought, oh, that's cool. And it's kind of saved me from getting bullied. But then it became the catalyst for doing what I'm doing now. But what happened was also over the years, when I started to explore. So what I first started to do was, when I was healing myself, was I created this type of music therapy combining breath and rhythm to change altered brainwave state. Because in that state, you can speak directly to your unconscious mind. It's like a self-hypnotic tool. And that started, I created this brainwave entrainment music technology called Trip Neural, which then ended up actually being the soundtrack to a lot of the top therapists in the world. Like Mind Valley used it, Marissa Peer, who's a dear friend, even Wim Hof. I ended up producing the soundtracks for Wim Hof method.
Nice.
So it took me on a crazy journey of its own. But it was in India where I really found out about this whole brain activation techniques for children. So there's all these after school workshops that were happening with children in India, because in India education is extremely competitive. And so there's billion kids, well, not billion, but a lot of children who are competing for few jobs at the top. And Indian parents are very strict. I'm sure you can relate. Asian parents very strict when it comes to academics. So in order to make their kids have the edge, they would send them to these after school workshops that work on activating the third eye in children, awakens the third eye. But they do it in a scientific way, so it's not like any kind of religion involved. And the results we're seeing with kids like accelerating through school was just astonishing. But also they were getting psychic abilities where they could like see completely and utterly blindfolded. We debunked this with a magician. I had a friend who happens to be a magician, so he could see if anyone's doing magic tricks. But he's also a hypnotherapist, so we used to do stuff together. But we went to India to discover real magic, to see if it really exists. And that's when we discovered these kids, school workshops. And we tried debunking them, but we couldn't. So there was a few kids they were clearly cheating, but a lot of kids were displaying like these kind of psychic abilities, clairvoyance. Even we saw kids doing telekinesis, moving coins, with their just intentionally. So it was strange. Like there were some kids who were definitely faking it, but others that were just the best magicians we've ever seen. Like forget David Blaine and all these guys. These like went next level, but for real. So that got me thinking and about right brain education, because that's what they're doing. That if you activate and make the whole brain function, right, and we're talking not just the brain in our head, but the entire somatic intelligence of the whole body, we can actually create like revolution in educational system, and help humans who are now going to lose their jobs because of robots to find a new outlet for being creative and actually inventing things that could solve the world's problems. So that actually was something I started. We're going to bring these school workshops around, but then to England first, but then I got warned to not do it and to focus on something else because they said it was too risky. If you start doing stuff like this, you'd get slammed by the authorities. So I decided to go down my own path eventually, which is with Soma Breath. And many of those techniques are within our educational system, and with adults you can get some really astonishing results in terms of cognitive improvement, even helping with things like autoimmune diseases, because autoimmune is a spiritual issue, right, with the energy in the body, but it's also down to the way the brain's being exercised. So with Soma Breath, our system is all about working on both hemispheres of the brain, activating the nervous system. We use techniques like neurobics, which is exercises, movement, that activates both hemispheres of the brain. We use Soma Breath Yoga, which also activates both hemispheres. We have alternate nostril breathing techniques that work on activating both hemispheres, different pranayama techniques, and music combined. And just doing spiritual practices like this with music has this awakening experience. And we've actually got Cambridge University right now studying our technique because they're fascinated with the power and the results we're getting from it. So a lot of cool stuff's happening at the moment, and we train instructors on how to deliver and teach these techniques. And we're also now currently also working on an educational system for children. That's something that we're doing behind the scenes. That's right.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible. And it's like you're doing so much and so many different areas and ages. And I would love to hear more about how you really help cultivate the mind and how do we expand the mind's capacity to heal and to maintain those peak states. I feel like you're mentioning where you can even, do things that seem other humanly, or otherworldly. Is there like a certain amount of time you need to practice? Is it different for everybody? What does that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. So first you got to understand what is the mind, where is the mind? And there's a saying going, where is the mind? Never mind, because we just don't know. Nobody really knows for sure. But people have made like models of consciousness, and how the mind evolves throughout your life, because it evolves throughout different stages of your life. And one of them I really like is Timothy Leary's 8 circuit model of consciousness, which I base a lot of my system of transformation through. And this talks about like unconscious codes that are formed, that gives us a conscious filter of reality, which are called reality tunnels, which we choose to kind of go down, and then our life kind of goes down a certain path based on how we're programmed from a young age. And most of this programming happens from 0 to 7 years old. And the first code is the survival code. It's what happens when we are born for the first time, have to fend for ourselves, and then the interaction with our mother and breastfeeding. And this can give us our sense of what's safe and unsafe. All right. And also it's sensorial. So our physical body and the senses from our physical body are like activated, during this state. And it also determines like whether you are somebody who seeks a lot of comfort, because what's the first thing we do when we're born? We're trying to feed, right, and get food from our mouth. So we seek a lot of comfort, especially if there's some issue that happens in this early phase. through things like smoking. Smoking is like sucking on a nipple, actually, right? It's like a kind of a replacement for that. And then comfort eating food and sipping hot drinks, certain habits are created based on our need for comfort and whether we see the world as safe or unsafe. And then the second code is all about emotions, and that's when the limbic system forms. The first code is when the reptilian brain is formed, the most primitive part, the brain stem. And then the second is the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. And this is when we start to learn about our own emotions and levels of significance, whether we feel we're important, our level of kind of whether we are like the dominant person in a room when we go into a social circle. Are you the alpha male or alpha female, or are you the beta submissive personality type, whether you're dominant or submissive? So these are hardwired programs that are formed in our operating system of the mind from a very young age, and they're very hard to shift. So, whether you're an optimist or pessimist, or whether you're somebody who has to be the loudest in the room, or you're the quiet, timid one in the back, these are hardwired personality traits. So if you think about it, how much of your life actually depends on these codes, like revolves around these codes? Like, imagine if you were an optimist rather than a pessimist, and you saw the world with lots of trust and opportunity, how your life would change. And what if you're a real pessimist and you say no to everything? How different would your life be, right? And if you're somebody who has to be the leader, the most significant one, versus the submissive one, just think about how different your life would be if you had a different opposite personality to what you've got now. So these are the hardest to shift, and they make quite predictable kind of patterns of behavior for people. And like the first code can lead to like whether you're a risk taker or somebody who just stays in a safe, secure job and never leaves their town. And the second one's all about how you react, how easily you're triggered in situations. And these, if you think about it, what makes people successful really, and to get really ahead and have the best like way of life and experience of life, is also quite a lot down to how likable you are, how attractive you are, how much people want to be around in your presence. Okay, because it's usually the team that creates the magic in the world. And if you want to be happy and fulfilled and feel like you belong to something, you've got to also become likable and attractive and have those personality traits. So people get these fixed characteristics, that rigid characteristics that stay with them forever, quite often, until something shakes them up, wakes them up. And you can go down one or two paths, right? And then you have these other codes, the third code and the fourth. The third is all about language, communication, reading, writing, and educational system. That defines a lot of who we are, especially religion plays a big part here. And the fourth one is the sexual code and our morals. And this is something that happens after puberty, and we start to get attraction and understand sexual pleasure, sex with pleasure. And these form these four circuits, which are quite hard to shift until something wakes us up, an awakening happens. And Tantric Yoga, for example, is all about waking us up by changing our conscious state to a higher conscious state that changes our perception of ourself, where we go slightly out of who we are and start to see ourselves in a new way, a new perception. So Tantric Yoga is all about this. Breath work does this. Cannabis activates this. It creates a full body bliss that actually can wake us up, and we start to see the world in a different way. Other psychedelics like psilocybin has an effect. MDMA, similar. And then the sixth code after that is when we tap into a mind beyond this mind, a universal mind. the mind, consciousness of all living things. This is when we get these divine downloads. And there's also certain drugs can get us there. Certain yogic practices can get us into the state. And then there's a seventh and eighth one, which are even higher states of consciousness, where we can get into a state where we can reprogram and wipe the slate clean of all other states. So ayahuasca, ketamine is meant to be the ultimate deprogramming drug of all. LSD. But with Tantric Yoga or breath work or Qigong even, and all these spiritual practices, we can actually get into these states naturally, okay? Or we can work with like plant medicines to accelerate that process, all right? So with Soma Breath, I really realized that actually with our breath meditation and guided visualization techniques, we get people very quickly into this fifth state and beyond, which allows them to be their own software programmer. So if you imagine those 4 codes are like programs of an operating system, when you get into the 5th code, you actually become your own programmer. The 4 codes are programmed by the environment, epigenetics, and this can dictate a lot who we are, right? And our genes and all this stuff gets switched on and off based on the environment. But when we get into the 5th code and above, we have the ability to recode and repattern and even switch our own genetics on and off. And this is what the shamans, the tantrics were all like adepts of. But with Soma Breath, I've made a system that takes, really understand who you are, your 4 codes, and then to be able to let go of things that don't serve you and call in things that do. So you can reprogram, clear viruses. It's really, we are like a lot like computers, okay? Robots. But we also have this conscious part of the mind that makes us human. So we can either be robots, and the reptilian brain is the robotic part of the brain. It's very habitual. It does everything based on what it's programmed to do. As I said, the first code, which is around the reptilian brain, is the hardest to shift. Or we can choose to be human, and by being human, we have to exercise the human part of the brain. And when we do that, we can then change our life. That brain change takes us to massive life experiences that would probably you never ever even visualize or saw before. Like with me, I was very much living by the 4 programs. And then I discovered music, boom. I had a big aha moment. I still did the safe stuff because certainty's still there. I still went and did a pharmacy degree, but at the same time, I was building this music business, and that was amazing. Huge awakening, boom. But then I crashed and burned because I didn't have the right programs yet. So then I went back into the pharmacy world, and I started living by those 4 codes solely, because you can operate from one of those codes more. And you know, when you're in a pharmacy, you're really living by the first code and the second. You're literally robots, and you're just dealing with crazy workload. So you're just in survival mode all the time. Your fight and flight response is switched on. I was getting psychosomatic problems like all the time, like heartburn, indigestion, like colon issues, constipation. All of these psychosomatic problems, these symptoms we get, are your reptilian brain telling you there's something wrong, there's danger, and you need to do something about it. And these are really your dominant thoughts. These are the things that basically determine whether you take a decision or not. It's your dominant thoughts, not the voice in your head. The voice in your head, the ego mind, the worries about the future and past is there, but it's usually noise. It's the dominant thoughts that determines whether we take action or not. Okay, and this is down to our first 2 codes, the reptilian and limbic system. So, and these throughout your life can change until people have a wake-up call, an awakening, and they sometimes do it through suddenly taking MDMA one night at the party, or through psilocybin at some kind of mushroom ceremony, or they go to Peru to do ayahuasca, and then they become a completely different person as a result. But these are temporary shifts, right? When you do ayahuasca or psilocybin, it gives you a temporary activation of these higher circuits, which allows you to see yourself. So unless you know how to work with those codes and reprogram them, you have those fleeting moments of awakening, but then you end up still living by the four codes because those codes are programmed so heavily. So
Mm.
with Soma Breath, I've tried to create a system which is lasts. It's a lasting change. It's a change of your complete character from a code level, for the first four code level. And through this, you become a completely different person as a result. So we don't cure people, because cure means bring people back to who they were before they got the disease. All right. That's who they were. It's their habits, lifestyle, the way of thinking, the mindset that got them sick in the first place. So you don't cure people. That's a really bad idea. Transform is what we do. So you become a completely different person with new beliefs, new habits, a totally new outlook on life. And this changes everything, because when it comes to disease, because you asked about disease, every single cell in your body came together, right, at one point of evolution. Because at first we were just single cell organisms in the sea, and there were these amoeba bacteria were multiplying, and they were then taking up all the resources and then collapsing, until one day they just got tired of fighting with each other and they decided to come together, right, based on trust, love, cooperation, to form multicellular organisms. Those multicellular organisms eventually led to who we are today. And we are now actually a complete ecosystem of bacterial cells and human cells all coexisting in harmony. But they're based on trust, love, and connection, and faith in each other, right? This creates a symbiotic relationship. However, when you, and there's a conscious language of how trusting each one of your cells is, and how harmonious they are. That's your state of well-being. So if you're depressed, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling anxious, if you've got an autoimmune disease where every cell is attacking each other, right? The healthy cells are attacking healthy cells, right? There's confusion, even cancer, right? That means that there's become a disturbance in the communication and the level of trust between the system, and there's a system collapse. So what we do with Soma Breath is we recreate that optimism for life. So how you view the environment, whether you see it as safe or unsafe, really makes an impact here.
Right.
And when you can change your mindset to being more optimistic, trusting, open-hearted, more loving, and you allow love to come in, everything changes. So that's why Soma Breath is so powerful, so important
Right.
as a way of life, to help people so that you don't have to be dependent on drugs.
Mm.
You don't have to go to Peru and do ayahuasca if you don't want to. You can do all of this just with your breath. That's the power of the breath. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you said a lot of great things. And one of the things that stuck out most was how a lot of illness comes from this rigidity of mindset, of, robotic patterns and habits, and really just how Soma Breath can really help awaken and make people more flexible in how their definition of self is. I'm curious if you could just elaborate more. Do you have any examples, for instance, like what does one of your visualizations look like, or just how exactly does one begin to breathe again, or they're
Yeah.
just like many different techniques that you use?
Yeah. So Soma Breath is like a library of different techniques, but I'll talk to you right now about our kind of signature technique. We call it Soma Awakening technique because it awakens a lot of things in the body. It awakens basically different parts of the mind and brain, because you get massive blood flow going to the brain for the first time. For many people, for parts of the brain have probably had suppressed blood flow because of stress, and then suddenly, boom, you get blood flow going to your brain, and boom, that awakens you. Also into your heart. The heart gets more blood flow, and you awaken every single blood vessel in your body, actually. But then also you actually can awaken stem cells. So when you wake up stem cells have the ability to go and lower inflammation and turn into any other cell in the body. And we actually have a lot of stem cells in the body, but they hide in very low oxygen environments, okay, called hypoxic niches. And when you lower the oxygen levels in your blood for a brief period of time, okay, called intermittent hypoxia, you can wake up these endogenous stem cells that do have these healing abilities. So our technique, it revolves around kumbhaka, breath retention. And when you hold your breath in various ways, okay, what happens is you actually lower the oxygen for a brief period of time. And that creates an adaptive change, adaptive response to the body, which has this awakening and strengthening effect over the whole physiology. Now, in order to make this work, you have to do rhythmic breathing, followed by holding your breath after the exhale. And the rhythmic breathing part we have, okay, so the way you do it in yoga is you do Bhastrika, followed by Kumbhaka, breath retention. Bhastrika is this fast breathing in and out through your nose, and then holding your breath. However, there's been many studies that show, and there's also pranayama techniques, which is all about rhythmic breathing. And these studies show that when you breathe in a perfect rhythm, because every single function in your body is rhythmic, right? It follows biorhythms. When you breathe in a perfect rhythm, you tune all the other rhythms in your body. And when rhythms go off balance, this is what creates disharmony. So harmonizing your breath by rhythmic breathing, even if it's just for a few minutes a day, can tune and entrain the functions of your body to become more harmonious. So our breathing tracks follow about rhythmic breathing to a beat. So the music has a beat to it, and you're breathing in perfect rhythm. It creates this state called coherence, which is this harmonizing. This coherence actually improves your well-being, your mood. It brings your nervous system to balance. And then it also has this effect of allowing you then to hold your breath for longer periods of time, because the rhythmic breathing breathes out CO2. CO2 is what tells your brain you need to breathe again. So when you have less CO2 in the body temporarily, we're not doing it for a long time because we want actually more CO2. That's a whole nother story. Then you can hold your breath for long periods. And what you can also do when you hold your breath is fall into very deep meditative states. Because breath is so intimately linked to your mind and your thoughts. When you breathe in, you're inspired. That's why inspiration, and inspire, breathing in, are like the same word, right? You create thought by inspiration, on your inspiration. When you hold your breath after the exhale, expiration, you kind of press pause on life for a moment. And when you do it for long enough, it's literally like the defrag of your operating system. You know, like what happens when you have a computer that's filled with clutter, all right? Too many files all over the place. You defrag it and it assembles all the files and it brings you back to normal and harmony. Same thing with this breathing technique. And also what it allows you to do is then use guided imagery, guided visualization techniques to create a therapeutic effect, okay? Because the neuroplasticity of the brain is enhanced. In fact, there's a scientist called Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's quite well known. He talks about neuroplasticity being enhanced through a period of attention and focus followed by the switching off of the brain, okay? So that's what our technique does. Rhythmic breathing is alert and focus, followed by pausing your breath, which is switching off the brain. And that fluctuation of the two actually is what's necessary for brain change. So Soma Breath, I just learned this recently. I had no idea until recently that when I saw his podcast about this. So, but we kind of accidentally created a system that already does this very dramatically. And we've had a neuroscientist, Jeff Tarrant, do a study on this, which you can find out on our site, showing how we change the brain and the brainwave states in similar ways to MDMA and psilocybin. meaning that we can use the star breathing technique as an adjunct or a replacement to these psychedelic therapies that are proven to be so successful for helping people with mental health issues. And but also it helps you physical health benefits. It gives you a lot of great improvements, your stamina, fitness, overall health, and healing inflammation, all these things. So yeah, so that's the core technique. And when you bring guided visualization into it, you can actually use it to reprogram the unconscious mind. And we start with short tracks, like 10 to 20 minutes, short bursts of like feeling amazing. So it's a great way to start the day every morning, set intentions with it. But then we do longer, more profound breath journeys that take people into peak states, taking them out of this ordinary level of thinking to higher levels, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th circuits, codes, which then allows people to completely reset and transform their life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds incredible. And it almost sounds like, like a workout for your brain where you're just like, like doing reps, and each one is like, work and then rest and work and then rest.
Correct.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing.
I call it a high intensity training for your mind, body, and spirit.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. And is there like a lot of visualization involved? So like when or like affirmations, like when people are listening to these
Yeah.
audios?
Yeah, we use all of these hypnotic tools because they're very powerful when done in these states.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Where can people find these, different audios, recordings? Is it on your website?
Yeah, so on somabreath.com, you can sign up for a free masterclass that goes into all of this in more depth. But then also on YouTube, we have lots of free stuff, lots of amazing videos that goes into all the science very well. And then we have Facebook group, which is very active. Check out Soma Breath Facebook group. And my Instagram, you can check out my Instagram, Niraj Naik Official on Instagram, and also sign up for the follow the Soma Breath one as well. Those are cool content that we're sharing all the time.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, do you have any last minute tips on how people can really maintain their sense of, healing, love, joy, just really connecting to who they are?
Yeah. It's more like I'm really all about self-inquiry. People don't ask themselves questions enough. One thing you'll also observe when you go out into a social environment, very few people ask questions at all. They love to talk about themselves, but they don't often like sit back, listen, and ask questions and be curious and interested in other people. You can notice the difference between the two. And actually, a little tip is if you become a listener and somebody who's curious about other people like you way more. Trust me. Unless, if you're somebody who just loves to go on and on about yourself, which I've been doing and it's cool, which I don't usually like doing, it's not the same, So basically, do this for yourself. Be your own guru for a change, right? Be your own, but to become your own guru, you've got to ask yourself questions, right? To analyze, figure out who you truly are. The first question to ask yourself every single morning is, am I waking up with absolute enthusiasm to do a hard day's work, or do I feel like I'm having to do this just to survive, right? And am I waking up every morning to be kind and compassionate to others, or am I just having to do it? I don't really want to, right? When you start to answer those questions with, oh, I'm just having to do this to survive, that's the first sign of stress kicking in, right? Chronic stress. Chronic stress leads to spiritual disturbances. Your breathing becomes erratic. It goes off. Your habits and choices go off. You stop being nice to yourself and you stop being nice to other people. And eventually you get sick, you get disease. So when you can wake up every morning with absolute enthusiasm for life, and everyone's going to be different. I'm not going to tell you the answer of how to do that because everyone has a different answer. You know what the answer is deep down. When you trust in the universe to support you and have faith that if you go after the thing that really makes you tick, that's going to help you bring value to the world, service to the world, when you go after that and you trust it's possible for you, okay, and you do the necessary work, because it doesn't just magically appear like that book The Secret told you it would. You have to do some work because you have to create the value, and by creating the value, it means you've got to become valuable yourself. You got to upgrade yourself to be that person you need to be to deserve all of those things that you want, right? When you do that and you mix that hard work ethic, that Asian, Indian hard work ethic with proven roadmap, a plan, right? You can achieve anything. Like the amount that Indians and Asians work, right, to do a job that they don't really want to do is phenomenal. Especially they try and get jobs in corporations working for other people, right? And a lot of them do excel and they end up being like, like Google, for example, is just run by, I think, Indians now and Asians. If they were to put that much effort into themselves, right, to figure out what it is they really want to do and how to get there, I'm telling you, you would have a massive revolution in India and Asia like we've never seen before. You would have a massive, I think, renaissance of new ideas, creativity, and inventions that would just completely solve all the world's problems. But because of this archaic, dogmatic educational system, we're just creating robots who are going to work as robots with other people, like almost like slaves. And I'm telling you, there's so many amazing, special, talented people out there in the world who, if only they would trust themselves and do as much work on themselves as they do for their parents or educational system to get those safe, secure jobs. If they could take a little bit of a risk and work harder on themselves than they do on these silly jobs that they usually hate doing, boom, everything will change. So there you go.
I love that. Learn how to trust yourself and motivate yourself and really create the life you want. And I think what you said about trust and faith, and it's really powerful. So yeah, thank you again for all of your wisdom and just for creating such a beautiful program for the world and really helping people unlock their potential. So yeah, thank you so much, Niraj, and I hope you have
Beautiful.
a great rest of your day.
You too. Great talking to you.